Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome to this new video. Today I want to share with you a list of gardening jobs that I do in my balcony garden in January. I think this is a really realistic list of the things that you can actually do in your garden around this time of year. And I think it's also universal enough to where you can use it almost as a checklist and apply it to your own garden, no matter what hardiness zone you live in and no matter what's the weather outside. This winter is exceptionally cold. We've had temperatures drop below freezing every single night from about mid-December all the way until now, with the coldest temperatures reaching minus 10 degrees Celsius. And this is very unusual for us here in Zone 8. So the first thing that I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna check on all of my conifers and evergreens, because due to the fact that these plants keep their foliage in the winter, they also lose moisture through those leaves. So it's really important to check on the soil and to not allow it to completely dry out for too long periods of time. Because the soil was frozen for quite a while now. Now the temperatures have finally warmed up, so the soil is no longer frozen. So it's a good moment to check on that soil and to water if it feels dry to touch, which I'm sure it's gonna be pretty dry at this point. Normally, I check on all of my evergreens and conifers every couple of weeks because even though my balcony is uncovered, these plants usually don't receive any moisture due to rain shadow. If your balcony receives some moisture through the rain or from snow, that may be just enough for your plants, but it's still a good idea to check on them every couple of weeks. And if you live in a climate where the soil freezes for really long periods of time, it's a good idea to give your conifers a good drink in the fall and then to wrap the pot in a bubble wrap to hopefully prevent that soil from freezing. Had I known that this winter would be so cold, I would probably do it to my own conifers as well. Not enough water can be obviously as damaging as too much water. So if you have any plants that are standing in the saucers, always keep an eye on them and pour out any water that has accumulated in them. Ideally, if possible, don't use saucers during that period of fall, winter, early spring, but I know that's not always possible. I myself use saucers here in the railing planters because obviously I don't want any water and dirt to be running off the building walls. So if you have to use saucers, always make sure to pour out any water because we don't want our plants to be standing in a saucer full of water because that could cause the plants to rot. In my balcony garden, I have a draining system in the floor, so all the water that I pour directly on the floor of my balcony is directly evacuated through the floors to the gutters. Next task is check your winter protection. I use fleece to protect my more tender plants from frost, but it's really important to not keep that fleece on for too long. You don't want to keep it on for more than 2 weeks at a time, because then what happens, we create sort of microclimate inside. We increase the temperature inside, we raise the humidity levels, and this not only can cause mold to start to develop, it can cause our plants to start rotting, but it can also trigger our plants to start sprouting prematurely or to produce new fresh growth. And then obviously that plant will be even more vulnerable to frost. So once the temperature warms up, even if it's just for a day, go out in your garden, allow that plant to have some fresh air, circulate around it, remove that first protection or just, open it a little bit, allow some fresh air to circulate, and then you can always put it back on if the temperatures drop at night. At this point, I'm gonna remove it completely because we do not have any hard frost in the forecast for the next couple of weeks, so it's a good idea to remove it completely. By late January, you may start to see some first crocus or early blooming daffodils starting to poke through the soil. So that means they are actively growing, and from this moment onwards we should pay a little bit more attention to them and to not allow the soil to completely dry out. So stick your finger in the soil. If the first few centimeters of the soil feel dry to touch, give them a splash of water. Here again, you don't want to fully saturate the soil, but you also don't want these bulbs to be completely dry. Next on my January to-do list is to refill food for birds. I always put out food for birds in the winter, and my favorite way of feeding birds is to create these DIY pinecone bird feeders. I shared with you in a recent reel on how to do it. Birds absolutely love them. They ate almost all of it already, so I'm gonna remove these and put out some fresh ones. If you put out food for birds, it's a good idea to clean that area, clean either the area where you leave the food for birds or the bird feeders themselves, and put out some fresh food every couple of weeks. Alright, fresh pine cones ready. So I continue to put out food for birds until early spring, when the weather is warm, the soil is no longer frozen, and the birds have easier time finding food on their own. For me, a sign is usually when birds stop eating these pine cones, they lose interest in the pine cones, and instead they start digging up in my pots in search for worms, because I have plenty of worms in my containers. So when they lose interest in pine cones and instead make a huge mess in my containers, that's when I usually stop putting out food for them. And the next couple of things that you can do for your January garden, you can actually do indoors. We were just checking on our bulbs outside, those that started to sprout already. So now let's check on our bulbs indoors. But I'm not talking about those beautiful indoor bulbs that are perhaps blooming in your homes right now, like amaryllis and paper whites. I'm talking about bulbs that we are overwintering indoors. Perhaps you are storing some tender summer bulbs and tubers like dahlias, begonias, or caladiums. I personally have a stash of caladiums in here, so it's a good idea to check on those every now and then. So you want to make sure that they are still dry and firm. There is no mold developing. If you see any rot, immediately get rid of those bulbs, because you don't want that to spread further into your bulb collection. I just see birds through the window. They arrive to the pine cones that I put out for them. So cute. I try not to move, not to scare them away. And last but not least, what you can do in your January garden is to plan your garden for this year. By this time, most shops already sell their summer bulbs and tubers, so that's something that you can already prepare and order online ahead of time. Go through your seed stash, check if there's anything else that you would like to grow this year. Also, really important to check the expiry date on your seeds. Certain seeds lose viability, the ability to sprout, already after a year or two. Others can be stored a little longer, but it's always a good idea to check the expiry date and get rid of all the old seeds or seeds that are very close to the expiry date. I know it can feel like a huge waste to get rid of seeds, but at the same time, there's really no point sowing old seeds, because in most cases they will not germinate or will germinate very poorly. So it's always a better idea to start with fresh seeds. Alright, this is gonna be it for today's video. Hope that you enjoyed it and it gave you motivation to go out and do a couple of things in your garden. Let me know if there's anything else that you would add to this list. Hope you have a beautiful day, and we'll see each other in the next video.